else in terms of how McVeigh and Mangum has transitioned? What's changed?
So the one thing that I've actually kind of realized and thought about, and hopefully, Autodesk might be able to go look into this a little bit more, but everybody is consistently working on a project server, right? Everybody has their storage drives and, their projects drive, whether you did a P drive or an X drive, and then everybody has their Revit files there. So that's the typical situation for most people. And BIM 360 kind of takes your Revit files and moves them away, but really what happens to all that other information? What we've seen a lot now is, all right, so where does the information live? How did this transition work? I think, are you using BIM 360 from your local machine and then having the VPN to access other stuff? Or are you, having a VPN to a desktop that is running Revit that is accessing BIM 360 and the other video or the other data that's on your server? So what I'm hoping to see soon is something that will almost be a sync between a BIM 360 drive and a local drive, and not just the desktop connector, because everybody knows, if you don't know, always update your desktop connector, because if yours is out of date, you're going to start losing some information or break something. I don't know about
you. I get updates in the corner of my screen so often, way more often than I want to get. Right? Are you seeing that too, where desktop connectors just always having updates?
So there was one, this last one is really interesting, because if right now I had one of my associates end up getting an update, I would even go click on the desktop connector and say, check for updates, and it wouldn't show me a new one. So I would have to go download it from the website, but it literally was not allowing us to see all the same files. So it's really interesting. Almost it's like, hey, why don't you just make it a push and everybody gets the update all the time? It's what you guys need. But, that's become key, but it doesn't recognize all project or all file types. It doesn't like zip files or IFC files really. So it's a matter of what are we doing with the other stuff that we have per project basis that we really need. Not to mention that others on the call, you guys group, jump in and let me know.
Circumstance. We've tried to move everything up to the cloud, right? So Excel files, PDFs, anything that the team needs to access, we tried to cut them having to get to the company server. So that's another thing that we want to ask you guys. How are you getting to your company data? Is it, you're having to access the actual company server? Or like I said, is it all on the cloud? Maybe you have a VPN situation, you have a VDI, or maybe you have something else completely. We definitely want to hear from you. So go ahead, we'll take one more second to answer that, show you the results. There we go. So as you probably were expecting, a lot of people are using VPN, whether that's VPN and then remote desktop or whatever it might be, to be able to get into their company data and maybe even access a pooled machine of sorts, right? So yeah, absolutely, Jacob. As you were saying, we've definitely tried to cut that back, but it really is a hassle, as you were mentioning, when we do have those limitations. And of course, it comes with a big training curve, right? Big learning curve, because it's completely different than what our users are used to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a different access point to Revit files. There's a different situation of how to open them and where it stores them. But seeing that a lot of people are still on VPN connections, I'm sure not everybody's office was set up with a full throughput for multiple people to be, VPN into the office, access data outside of the office, and then push it back to their local machines. So it's I'm sure a lot of people are seeing strain from, you know, the amount of information that they're pushing through. Um, and Dan Warren has
Right.
a very good acronym for it there.
Well, and I know that it causes degradation in your connectivity, right? So even when you're trying to download things from the cloud, sync things like that, I know that WebEx has put out kind of a PSA that, you know, being on VPN degrades their service. So definitely causes a lot of issues outside of the fact that we're not really ready for every single employee to be
Yeah.
on VPN, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really it depends on your settings, but a lot of VPNs actually start to pull the actual throughput from your office and not your local internet. So if you have gig internet at home, a lot of VPNs will actually push you to the, you know, 50 megs that your office is running and you're stuck on that, which if anybody's ever had to deal with that, that is the biggest pain in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So any other challenges that you guys have come up with in terms of working from home and the transition?
It was the matter of, you know, who has a strong enough computer that possibly could do it at home versus a lot of the engineering side of my company was set up with desktops. So as you saw, a lot of people had VPN or trying to do a virtual desktop interface. Well, most of my company set up to do RDP. So that was, you know, interesting because even if the project was on BIM 360, you are now VPN into a remote desktop to then access BIM 360. And just thinking about that, it's so backwards, right? The whole point was to be able to do it outside of the network and do it. But I will say that I hope everybody starts realizing if you're on BIM 360 and seeing it, the advantages are, is, you know, you can actually be in a hotel, 5 meg internet speed, and be logging into BIM 360 using Revit, pushing it back, and not be affecting all your, you know, employees that might be back in the office. Especially if anybody used the Revit server back in the day, of how that would hang up and tell everybody to hold on while you sync for 45 minutes. Um,
Right, which of course, if you know, we do still have those users that aren't used to working from home. So they just get on VPN and access the model right from their computer, right? And then
yep.
everybody experiences a freeze when they sync to Central, right? It's a great troubleshooting thing that I'm sure all of us BIM technicians and BIM folk have had to deal with for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody out there that has had a unique problem that they've ran into? Go ahead and speak up, because obviously this is something that
Yeah,
we've all
we
experienced
definitely
something in the
love to
past
hear
few
in the
months.
chat. And with that being said, I know that you know, a lot of us have used BIM 360 in the past, but I would assume that's probably leveraging, like Jacob was saying, local content, maybe even some local Revit projects where they're not being shared across offices and different things like that. So we want to hear from you guys. Do you plan on using BIM 360 after we get back to the office, whatever that looks like, right? Whenever that happens. So we do have a poll on that. Go ahead and throw that up. See what you guys anticipate in terms of your future and BIM 360. And just in terms of file content as well, where we've started to store our content, you know, is it on our company servers? Is it, you know, on the cloud, etc.? And that will be our next question there. So we'll wrap up this question, show the answers there. So just kind of as I expected, we'll probably go back to basically the way that we worked before, right? Where we will be utilizing BIM 360, but we'll also leverage the local content as well. So like I know at Smith Group, if we had a project that was very small, just in DC, really fast paced, maybe we don't need to throw it up on BIM 360. Maybe it can be just saved on our local server. So looks like half of us thought on that, but 25% actually will go all to the cloud. So that's really wonderful. So the next question we want to ask you guys is, outside of your Revit models, where do you store and share your your non-Revit content? So whether that's with consultants, whether that's internally, how are you guys leveraging sharing your files? You know, do you use Dropbox still? Is it all up on the cloud? Excuse me.
It looks like a few people have chimed in there with new forma, which, you know, new forma is a good option. It's got that whole you know, tracking system that you can actually make sure everything goes in the right place at the right time. For us, we actually have bit the dust and migrated a lot of it to Microsoft. The Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, trying to push all that together where we're actually seeing that. Of course, we still have, for some reason, an FTP site. We still have our, you know, Dropbox here and box files there. But other than that, it's basically we're trying to do as much as we can between Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, which is another integration I hope Autodesk finally bites and puts together with them, is to be able to sync those folders back and forth.
So let's go ahead and see from you guys how, I know some of us have shared within the chat, which is fantastic. Keep posting in there. We definitely want to hear from you guys how you're sharing data. And you can actually put in here multiple choices. So check all that apply. I noticed that in the chat, a lot of us are using OneDrive. I love OneDrive. I think OneDrive is fantastic. I know that we do get into problems with linking to OneDrive in Revit and different things like that. Maybe 2021 will be different. If anybody has some comments on that, I'd love to hear about that for those of you who are using OneDrive. Microsoft Teams, huge fan of Microsoft Teams. I think it's a huge benefit, especially when we're working from home or even collaborating across multiple offices, across multiple teams and disciplines. Really wonderful place for us to be able to share ideas, ask questions, what have you. And of course, the good old tried and true Google Drive. I'm a huge Google user. If I owned my own company, especially if it were smaller, I'd probably go all Google. That's just me. So let's go ahead and get the results there, see where we're looking at here. Once again, this was multiple choice, so. All right, so a lot of us are using BIM 360 completely. Looks like a quarter of us. That's awesome, and definitely where we're trying to go at Smith Group, trying to leverage all of our content that we can be up there, up on BIM 360. Lots of OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, and other. In the comments, we'd love to see what some of the others are. You guys want to share up there, if you don't mind? Love to hear that.
And for the people that's all on BIM 360, or even some of the other platforms, you know, one of the biggest things is you got to have a standard way of mapping all the information. BIM 360 automatically puts it all under your username and your app data. So if somebody opens a file that is XREFed or linked from Revit, you don't have the same path as the other groups. So you have to pay attention to that, because you could basically make everybody redo the process every single time. There are little tricks to fix BIM 360 and point it to, say, a second drive or a D drive, that everybody can have the same path, but there's a lot of, continue maintenance with that too.
Well, thank you so much, Jacob, for your input and some of the issues and successes that you guys have had at your company down there in North Carolina. We really appreciate it.